Okay, thank you very much, Miles, for joining me this afternoon with us. I appreciate you coming to the City of London. So we are going to ask some questions about your time as president of the International Academy of Family Lawyers. But before we do that and talk about your role in the IAFL, would you like to just give us a brief resume of your career so that listeners get to know a little bit about your early life as a lawyer and how you progressed through your career?
Thank you, Suzanne, for asking me to do it. I don't know if anyone will get any real benefit out of this, but I hope they do.
They will.
Anyway, just to go back very quickly, right back to the beginning, I trained with a firm called Radcliffe in Westminster, which I did the long articles, 5-year articles from 69 to 74. I qualified in 74, that's just obviously. And luckily in that firm was a chap called Edward Hudson, who was one of what was known then as the Magic Circle in London, which was probably about 6-8 practicing lawyers. Many of the best known names in family law over the last 20 years have been brought up, as it were, by those people and the successors to them. And Edward, by pure chance, was retiring when I was about 27 and asked me if I'd like to have a go at family law. I'd done 6 months during my training. To be honest, I wasn't really thinking in terms of family law. I was thinking in terms of trust work and tax planning, offshore work. And they persuaded me I ought to do it. And they said, well, if you do it for 2 years and you're enjoying it, carry on. And if not, we'll keep it.
You can be let off for good behaviour.
You get off for good behaviour and go back to my trust and tax planning.
Yeah.
Anyway, 44 years later or something, I packed up. But it was very interesting because looking at it, it's interesting to think that Edward Hudson had a greater insight into my character than I did myself, in the sense that he thought that I would be suited to it in the sense of getting involved in the work without getting too involved. We all know there can be problems if you get too close to the clients in a mental way. So I think he saw that there was some chance that I might be okay at it. And so I had a go at it. I stipulated that we should become a separate department, which wasn't at that stage. And they very kindly said, yeah, that's okay. So it was me and one assistant. And we got going. I became a partner, I think, when I was 28. Before I left to set up my own firm, it was at a time when there was actually a bad recession going on in London. Profits were way down. I had a lot of art going to that stage in terms of children in private school and all these things. And I had to do something. So I decided the best thing in that climate was to set up my own firm. And 2 of what were then salary partners at Radcliffe very nicely joined me, Sean Needhead and Julia Stanchik. And we went off, set up a practice on Fleet Street, and it went from there.
And that was one of the original, I think, boutiques.
Yeah, I think it probably was. London. Yes, people say it was. I didn't think about that at the time. I was actually offered jobs by 3 of the other main firms at the time, but I was thinking in that climate of recession that it was likely to be a sort of last in, first out type scenario. So I was a bit concerned that I'd better take my own destiny in my own hands. And it was fine. And it went, I was straight back to the old level of profits in the first year. And it then built from there, and it went very well. But it was an interesting time because I don't know if you want me to talk at this stage about anything to do with the academy, the setting up of the academy.
We'll come on to that in a minute.
Do that in a bit.
Yeah. So give me 2 or 3 of your career highlights.
Career highlights. Well, funny enough, I suppose the career highlight was actually walking off a short plank and setting up my own firm. Because, it was a gamble at the time. And, I didn't know whether it would work or not. And luckily it did work. So that turns out to be really the best decision I made career-wise ever, I think. I suppose other career highlights, fun enough, I suppose I was one of the founder members of what's called Resolution. It was the Solicitors Family Law Association. And I was on the original committee of that in 1982. 32, we had a go at that. But that was going to become huge. And it was not necessarily going to be focusing on the kind of work that I tended to do. which was mainly money oriented, but there's private children involved. And so, funny enough, after 3 years or 4 years of that, the opportunity to have a go at the IAFL came along, and that was perfect because it was going to be focused on international work, focused on top players in the market, the best players we could find around the world, and that was great.
Big career, Hannah.
Yeah, it was absolutely.
Do you have any top tips for young lawyers today?
Well, I don't know. It sounds. What I would say is just do the very, very best you can on every case you have. Don't think, oh, this case doesn't matter. I must deal with important cases. Every case is totally important. You must put everything you can into all those cases, and the world will work out for you. Because actually, the reality is that if you do really good work for people, they spread the word for you. And forget advertising, marketing, and all that stuff as far as I'm concerned. If you really do a great job for people, they'll be off singing your praises. Equally, if you do a bad job, they'll sing the opposite praises.
What is the thing? If we do something wrong, people will tell 15 people.
Exactly. And it goes straight through the world. Bad news, this guy is no good, is immediate.
Yeah.
And it whoosh, straight through, burns through. But good work actually gets you new business.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I found over the years was that actually finding people who are good at getting business is surprisingly hard. And I never quite understood it because I think there are an awful lot of lawyers who really love doing their work, but don't actually love the concept of getting more work.
No. Well, nobody told us at law school that we'd have to be salespeople.
And
So they didn't.
That is actually what we are.
Yeah.
And I always reckon, I had probably a minute and a half when a new person comes on the phone to either get on a rapport with them or lose it.
Yeah.
And it's a very you need to be very sensitive to the kind of situation going on around you, which is obviously much harder on a phone than it is when you're talking to someone face to face.
Now we have Zoom in this post-COVID world, which we didn't have.
Well, we do, but I'd still prefer to meet people face to face for the first meeting.
Exactly, I agree. So, in terms of career and life, what advice would you give your younger self?
I don't know, really. I think it's the same, really. It's just, try and do everything you do, whether it's work or play, anything, just do the best you can at it. And if you do that, you're not going to go far wrong, really.
That makes perfect sense. So it's a big buzz phrase at the minute now, work-life balance.
Yes.
So were you able to manage to achieve work-life balance? And do you have any top tips for those of us who are still working hard at it?
Well, it's a hard one because it gets harder all the time in a way to have a work-life balance. I know, you say we're working from home in terms of help with work-life balance, but I mean, the real problem now is the permanent inability to turn off from work. And, I packed up now 6 years ago, and I was just about able to keep a distinction between when I was working and when I wasn't working. And I could go on holiday. I'd say to the firm, look, don't get in touch with me unless something's gone really wrong. Yeah. And there were a couple of occasions when something went really wrong.
Yeah, but then we know it's a proper emergency and you dive in.
The idea now of going on holiday and sitting down in the south of France by a swimming pool and the phone's going or there are messages coming through, it's not a holiday.
No.
And I think the other thing that's really bad about it is that it doesn't enable you to pass work down the line and give young lawyers some responsibility, because you're permanently dealing with it. Now, if I went on 2 weeks holiday, I reckon my assistants grew up enormously in 2 weeks because they suddenly thought, I know.
My boss, when I was an associate who I did most of my work for, used to go to France for the whole of August every year.
Really?
And not once in 7 years did I contact her. and the thought of that happening now is just a complete anathema.
So in so many ways, it just doesn't work, I think.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I don't know how you maintain a work-life balance. People are talking about it more and more.
Yes.
I mean, in some ways you can say I didn't have a great work-life balance because, I worked quite hard. But frankly, even when I set the firm up, I worked on the basis that no one in the office should do longer hours than I did. And I didn't intend to work ridiculous hours. And I focused the whole thing, I get into the office, I will say at 9 o'clock, and usually I could be away by 6. And obviously, still work at odd times, or weekends and overnight or whatever. But basically, it seemed to me that if you couldn't do a decent day's work between 9 and 6 with half an hour break for a sandwich, you'd be superhuman. I mean, this idea of working 15 hours a day, I'm not really convinced.
How productive we are on our 14, I'm not quite sure.
You probably are. You're probably totally productive.
No, I don't think so.
But my perception of it was, if you're going to work for 40 years,
the marathon and not the sprint.
By the time you're 50 or something, actually, if you do a solid day's work, and you also got to allow time in the context of family law, in my view, to socialise. Because you can call that a work-life balance, but it's actually crucially important. To go to drinks party, go out to dinner, see people. Because again, how do you get the business if you're not out there seeing people and doing things?
No, exactly. And working that into your working week as well, as opposed to waiting for 6 months and then trying to pick it up.
Yeah, well, you can't really. And I'm not saying I got it right at all. So, there were lots of times, I'm sure, when I was so focused on what I was doing that things at home were missed out and all sorts of stuff. And I certainly didn't do as many dinner parties and drinks parties at times as I should have done, simply because of knackered. But it's the way it goes, isn't it?
That's life. So let's turn to the real meat of why we're here.
Right.
How did you first become involved with the IAFL?
Well, right actually at the beginning, because this was 1986, beginning of 86, I think. And the IBA were having a conference here, and a couple of the American lawyers who were over for the IBA meeting got in touch with someone called Peter Gross-Hodge, who's no longer around. I'm not sure, but I think he might die. I'm not sure. I haven't seen him for years, actually. And he was with Speech Liberation, as it was at the time. And they got in touch with him and said, would you fly out for a drink and bring another lawyer with you? And by chance, Peter, I don't know why, got in touch with me. I was a totally separate firm, but I'd had cases with him. And he said, will you join me? I said, well, I'd love to. So we went out for a drink with these two chaps from America. And they said, we're just a nice chat, really. And they said, well, we're doing more and more international work. And we said, well, of course we are too. And it's sort of getting really quite big stuff. And they said, would you be interested in setting up some sort of association to deal with international family work? And we said, brilliant. And so from there, I can't remember the total of the sequence, but basically, I think we then talked to one or two other English lawyers in London, and we had drinks down in, there's a bar called Scribes, which was down on Temple Avenue, sort of south of Fleet Street. And we had a drink with them, and they thought it was a good idea. Anyway, one way or another, and I'm never quite sure how or why, but it all happened. And I think it was October 86, there was a meeting called at the Inner Temple Hall, where the numbers of it's there from the founders list, but I think it was probably about a dozen Americans, 20 or so Brits, and half a dozen from around Europe, a few lawyers that we'd had contact with. And we had this meeting, and it was decided to set the thing up and call it the International Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. We're based in the States, Westchester County, New York State. And anyway, so I was deemed to be a bit young. I was 36 at the time. So Robert Johnson, well, what happened was that they decided in setting it up that they'd have two initial chapters. One would be the English chapter, and the other would be the US chapter. And the reason for those two was they thought there was a fair chance that you could get up to about 25 people with sort of sufficient critical mass for each of those groups fairly quickly. And Robert Johnson, who was a QC then, very nice chap who became a High Court judge. And anyway, Robert was made president of the English chapter. I was made president-elect of the English chapter. And we set off, and it trickled along quietly. And then Robert became a High Court judge in the autumn of 88, I suppose. And I took over as president of the English chapter, as it was, at the January 89. And then very quickly, I thought, well, it's very nice having an English chapter, but actually, wouldn't it be nicer to have a European chapter? Because it seemed to me that, there's an obvious link. We were in the EU or EC, or it was called in those days. And it just seemed logical, really, to make it into a European chapter. So I had a meeting, I called a meeting at the Law Society of all the English chapter, and just said, what do you think? And they all thought, it's right. So I said, right, okay, I'll organise a meeting in Paris, which I did for April 89, at a fairly straightforward hotel near the Musée d'Orsay. And we all got on board, and we all asked the European chapter fellows to, well, they weren't European chapter fellows, European, mainland European.
So how did you spread the word to get people to that
Well,
meeting?
we only had those half dozen probably from the original stuff,
Okay.
maybe one or two more,
Yeah.
but not many. So basically, I just sent an invitation to all the English fellows and to these ones and said, why don't you come? And I don't know if they all came, but a hell of a lot came. It was fantastic, actually. And the nice thing was, right from the word go, everyone was so just nicely enthusiastic and getting on with each other, which has always, to my mind, been a crucial element of the IAFL's success and the chapter's success. And so we had this meeting, we all got on fine. We then created the European chapter. So that was the spring of 89. And they asked me if I'd be president for 3 years to get the thing off the ground. So, and then we had meetings in Munich, Interlaken, and Lyon.
And were there people who were key in helping you in those meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone was very good, actually. But I mean, the name that stands out really throughout a lot of that, and subsequently, was very helpful, and still is. I'm in touch with him, sending him emails about the football. Not that I'm the greatest football cognoscenti, but he's been very nice about the fact that the Brits have got through in the football, and the Germans haven't, unfortunately, this time. But so we've been having this little exchange over the last few days. But it's Werner Martins, who is in Munich, and Werner did 90% of the work setting up the Munich meeting, which was our first annual meeting. Great, we visited the BMW factory and all the things we can do. And funny enough, we set the shape of the meetings, which is still now used. So we decided that we'd have a Wednesday evening sort of reception drink thing, and then education Thursday, Friday, Saturday morning, some sort of extra bits and pieces, things to do in the evenings, final dinner on Saturday night. And that really is, I think, is sort of
that is the format that I was at last week.
Yeah, exactly.
In 2022.
Yeah, so it seems to work, I think. Anyway, we did that. We did the Munich one, and then we had one in Interlaken next year. Again, Werner was very instrumental in that. And then the final meeting when I was president of it was in Lyon, in France. And I don't know if you knew that, probably. I don't know if you did.
A little bit before my time.
I think she probably died.
Yeah,
actually, because
sadly.
there was an amazing, very nice, enthusiastic fellow in Lyon called Audrey Ducroux. And very bubbly, very lively, vivacious, splendid, great. And actually, Werner took over as president from me, and Audrey was due to take over as president from him. Terribly, sadly, she died. I can't remember. It was certainly, obviously, before she became president, but I can't remember precisely when it was. But it was very interesting, really, because an awful lot of fellows flew to Lyon for the service. There was a service and funeral and things.
That goes back to your point of friendship and care and respect for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a fantastically bonding. It was tragic, sure, but it was it was bonding too, and it reinforced this whole feel of the academy as it was, and as it still is.
Fantastic. So, particular highlights from your presidency? What are the things when you look back that stand out?
What of the European chapter?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it was really just 99% of it was the fact that people were just so nice and so uncontroversial, so willing to help. I mean, that was 90% of what the good experience was. Because, you know, without that, honestly, it wouldn't have got off the ground, and frankly, I wouldn't have been involved.
Were there any rocky patches at any point?
Well, in the European chapter, no, there was a rocky patch when I became president of the academy, which we'll probably come on to. But no, but in the European chapter, no. I mean, we had no money or anything, but you know, we obviously in those days. I mean, you didn't think quite so much about the downside, you know. I mean, you know, if we'd had a meeting that had failed, I don't think what would happen. But we didn't, you know. So you just sort of bashed on.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything would have failed, if you know what I mean, because everyone was so determined to make it work.
Yeah. So when did you transition to be president of Global?
Well, I tell you what happened was that when I finished in 1992. As president of the European chapter, I was then elected as president-elect of the main academy. So that meant that I would automatically become president of the main academy 2 years later. So I did the 2 years, and it was quite interesting times actually, because it was in '94 that I left in tricky circumstances financially. I mean, I was nearly bust actually at the time. But tricky circumstances, I left to set up the firm. And that meeting, we had a meeting in Budapest, actually, in '94 in the spring, at which we were discussing my becoming president in September. And I actually had quite a wobble at that moment, because I suddenly thought, my new firm will be 3 months old. And here I am taking on the presidency without even knowing whether I've got a job. You know? Yeah. And it was very interesting, actually, because the people, again, I mean, I particularly remember Alan Ward and Helen Ward being really helpful to me. There was one particular situation which I need to go into about a client I'd had in my old firm. It was a complete maniac, and Helen, she understood this, would be exactly what I mean, and Alan would too. Anyway, the long and short of it is, I was persuaded that I should carry on, even though the firm was about 10 minutes old. And I did, and it was fine. But so I became president in September '94. Okay. That was the end of a Paris meeting where Arthur Berman had been president. And unusually, during that meeting, I took over at the end of the meeting. So standard now. But during that meeting, there were, you know, appointments, elections of various officers, and one of them was a contested election,
which is unusual.
Very unusual. And it was extraordinarily between Werner Martins and Philip Schwartz from Virginia. And we had a contested election, which I wasn't running or anything, but as I became president, I sort of took over after that. And Werner won the election. And then, to my surprise, on Christmas Eve of my first year of presidency, I got served with court proceedings.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, and I was served proceedings issued out of Westchester County.
Wow!
By Philip Schwartz, and so the proceedings were also served on Werner as the president-elect and on the academy itself. On the election, and that it should be set aside, and you know, it should start again or something. And that was interesting, but challenging, because
not a Christmas present you were expecting.
Well, it wasn't ideal. And I mean, literally, I got it about lunchtime on Christmas Eve, and to be honest, I was feeling very not happy for Christmas, and I thought, what the hell with this? Yeah. And although it was meant to be return date, apparently in some sort, I don't know what for, on the 6th of January, I thought. So I disappeared on holiday and came back in the new year. And I'd given a bit of thought over Christmas too, and I thought, well, what are we going to do? So I suddenly thought, well, I thought, well, actually, this is quite serious. I mean, this is quite a challenge, you know, that we're being sued. It wasn't something that I thought about as being a possibility, really.
And they probably didn't have director's insurance or anything like that.
No, nothing like that. And we had actually at the time, we had literally reserves of $10,000,
Yeah.
which is not a lot. Really.
No.
And so I was thinking, well, initially I thought, well, do we need to get some specialist sort of lawyers to come in and help us with this? We'll be busted, we can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, what do we do now? So I basically entered into discussion, negotiations, whatever you want to call it, with various people. And it took quite a while, actually. I mean, I can't remember, it went on for months, really, this process. Initially, we were very stuck. But various people got involved and became very, very helpful people generally. And one of the things that I always remember was that to take any steps in negotiations, I needed the governor's
authority.
Yeah. And I can't remember, there were about 30 governors, I don't know if there still are, but there were about 30 governors. And it was pre-email, so I couldn't just send an email to 30.
One email to 30 people.
So 30 faxes.
Oh,
30
checking
faxes.
the fax transmission slips.
30 faxes went off to all these other people. And you pretty well be certain that about 27, 28 get back to me within 2 hours. I think
wow, that's impressive.
one or two people who weren't totally on board, but actually the vast majority were. And I was so impressed. I mean, that they came back, so I came to them and say, look, guys, I think we need to do X, Y, and Z. They never sort of challenged me. There was a good go. And we got on with it. And then I think I'm right in saying that in the spring of 95, I think I'm right in saying there was a meeting in Seville, European chapter meeting, I think. And we made some progress there. There was a fair amount of chatting going on, trying to sort things out. And my first annual meeting was in Istanbul. And we worked it out, we got a deal sorted out. Brilliant. By that meeting. So I was really only doing it for, I suppose, 9 months of my time as president. But it was quite a lot.
Quite a lot. At the same time as your new firm had just been set up.
That's a good point, actually. I've forgotten that. But luckily the firm was going fine.
Yeah.
We were doing well. But it was very interesting because it was existential at the time. I mean, it was really, honestly, a question of could the academy fall apart? Yeah. Because, if there'd been a really divided field, if it had been 50-50 as to which way we should deal with this thing, it could have been really very awkward. But it worked out. And that we did a deal which involved Werner very, very nicely, good of him to do it. And he basically said, look, when I become president, I'll just do 1 year. Yeah. And then Phil Schwartz can do the second year. Yeah. And that's what we did. Good family law compromise, 50-50. It was what I call a very British compromise. But it did mean the place carried on. Yeah. Because I mean, really I can promise you that there was, I do remember it now, after about 4 or 5 months of this, I was thinking, is this the way that the IAFL is meant to be? Can an association last like this if it's litigation? No, I know. And also that the association is a bunch of volunteers. Yeah. So everybody has a full-time job and, this is on top of home responsibilities and work responsibilities. Absolutely. So it was, and to be honest, I did have a moment of thinking, actually, if I wasn't president, I think I'd go off and set up another. Well, I'm very glad you didn't. And I'm sure many other people are as well. I'm very glad I didn't. But you know what I mean? It was a bit like that, really. Tightrope. It was, but anyway, it was done, and so we had actually a really good meeting in Istanbul. It was great fun, a lot of laughs. Fiona Shackleton doing belly dance with proper belly dancers, and James Harkers too. Brilliant, interesting. But no, full circle. There were belly dancers in Marrakesh last week as well. So the story continues. Exactly. But it was a very interesting meeting, actually. Very, very good fun. And then the second year was much less eventful, which is a good thing. Good. And we had that meeting in Hong Kong. And that was in September 96, which is just before. And Chris Patton and his wife Lavender had been the divorce practitioner. We knew she was
Oh, no, I
director.
didn't know that.
And Nick Mostyn and others knew her. So we linked up with them and had a really good time because, I mean, we had a reception in Government House.
Brilliant.
Which, I mean, a lot of the Hong Kong practitioners said, oh, you know.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Government House.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because we had some historical stuff as well. I always tried with my meetings to have someone do a talk in the first session about the history of the place you were.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's all very well saying, well, let's look at the legal system here, but actually the actual history of the place.
Yeah.
And Istanbul and Hong Kong. I mean, they're really fascinating.
Long history.
Great talks. So it was good.
Brilliant.
So I had a lovely time.
Good.
Yeah. And
and who did you hand over to then afterwards?
Oh God, blimey, who did I hand over? It was Werner.
Werner.
It's always
Oh,
Werner.
then we'd have
Yes,
it's always
so
Werner.
it's Werner and yeah, and Phil Schwartz. So had one in Florence because that was just the time Princess Diana died.
Yes.
I think we were in Florence.
Yeah. Beginning of September. Yeah. So rolling forwards.
Yes.
If you were pitching the academy to a new joiner,
Yes.
what are the 3 reasons you would give for encouraging somebody now to become a fellow?
Well, number 1 is they're a nice lot of people.
Yes.
And that's
I can
probably
attest
2
to
and
that.
3 as well. But
Yeah.
I mean, no, but seriously, I keep on coming back to it boringly, but actually, it's. I mean, I think this concept of buddying is really good news. I mean, you know, how many times have you been to something, a first meeting? You go to a club for the first time. You know, I rowed once, taking my rowing camps and so time, and you know, you go there, and no one says hello to you or anything. And you turn up and you go to something and you come away and think, well, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And if someone takes your hand when you arrive and says, right, here we are, it's the first night reception, I'm going to introduce you to a few people. So you've got someone to then sort of know where to start with next time you come and help them through. You're going to get them to come to meetings. And that leads, I suppose, on to another thing, which is actually going to meetings.
Yeah.
Is really what these things are all about.
Yeah.
There's no just pay your dues and get the odd newsletter or something. Is not what it's all about at all in my book. Because what I was trying to do, I mean, apart from meet lots of lovely people, was actually to assess which of those people I thought would be great to help me with the case.
For the clients.
So you might have 5 people in New York and you wanted to know them all. Because rather like going to a barrister, you know, you want a selection, so you can say that person will be the right one for this particular client.
Yeah.
And without meeting them and talking and going to meals with them and things, you don't really get to know what they're talking about.
No, exactly.
What the right people situation is.
Yeah.
So again, it just keeps coming back to people.
Yeah. And the buddy system's still there. I had a buddy from San Francisco last week.
Perfect.
So it's still going.
But it's good, and I don't think you really appreciate just how much those people appreciate you doing it for them, actually. Because you know, you think, oh, I've just done it, but actually I've had people come back to me and say, you know, you buddied me 10 years
ago.
and I wouldn't be here if you hadn't done that. And it's lovely. You know.
No, it's important.
It is important.
So do you have a vision for the future of the academy?
That's
a loaded question.
It's a tricky one, isn't it, really? I must admit, when we set it up, I saw it very much as being focused on getting the very best practitioners you could around the world, getting to know those people, communicating with them, working with them, and being focused very much on our professional work. And the area that I find the trickiest, really, I don't know if you want to call it politics, but getting involved in major social issues. I find that's quite tricky, really, because to speak for the academy and to say, you know, we believe that so and so is wrong, the wrong thing to do, or the right thing to do, is pretty tricky because it's assuming that
we all sing from the same hymn sheet, and it's not necessary.
Come from the same culture or something, which of course we don't. So I mean, I could see the sense I was on the International Family Law Committee for a long time. And that was very much focusing on seeing what was happening in Europe and working on new legislation and considering the implications and being able to say, well, in France, I think they probably do it a different way, and maybe we should look at that.
Yeah.
They do this in Spain or something. And I could see that as being really useful. So when you saw legislation coming through or papers coming, white papers or whatever, you can do that. But I find the concept of doing it worldwide, I'd be quite nervous personally.
Even more tricky now.
Well, that's right. It is tricky.
Yeah.
And so I think it takes a lot of bravery for the academy to get too much into that. But whether that's just me being an old man, I don't know. But I think I personally see the main thing still as focusing on creating the right
Connections.
and the right connections. I've never been a networker in a formal sense at all. I've never gone around collecting people. I can't cope with that. I basically go to people I like.
Yeah.
And I've never seen the point in doing business with people I don't like.
Do you think there's anything that the academy should be concentrating on when you're looking now?
I think that's a hard one for me to comment on, really, because I'm 6 years out of the flow in a way, and I think I could easily misidentify. So I don't think I will.
We'll park that one.
I think so.
Oh, thank you. No, that's perfect. So just to round off, to give us all who've still got a few years left to work, tell us what you're doing and how you're spending your time now.
Gosh. Well, first thing I'd say, I am loving retirement.
Good. That's a good start.
So that is genuine. And I didn't have any plans to retire, but in fact, I retired slightly sooner than I thought I was going to. I thought I was going to retire at 70. And in fact, suddenly, literally one day, woke up, and by the end of the day, I decided I wanted to stop. I don't know what it was. It wasn't any particular case. It wasn't anything. So I suddenly stopped when I was in fact, I think it was when I was about 65, and then took about a year winding down, obviously, and getting things sorted out. But it's an interesting thing that. So I literally retired without any plan at all. And I decided that the focus should be on identifying things that interested me, which included strange things like rowing. And it sounds odd. I did a lot of rowing until I was 22. I was in the Olympic squad and things like that.
Amazing.
But, that's all a long time ago, obviously. But I stopped when I finished with that. I stopped for 44 years and then started when I retired.
Brilliant.
So I'm rowing again, and I got on the committee there at London Rowing Club and things. And so I've been involved on that side, and I edit a monthly newsletter that goes out this Thursday, actually, for London Rowing Club. I'm involved with London Leander as well as Rowing Club. Anyway, so rowing was something that I thought would be fun.
Brilliant.
And then also I've been involved a bit with my old school. I was at Shrewsbury School, and the old school rowing club asked me to be president of that fairly soon after retired, so I did 3 years of that. The committee is still there. But then I was asked after that to become chairman of the Old Sloping Club, which is about 8,000 members. So
amazing.
I'm running a club of 8,000.
So you haven't got any time, really? It sounds as if you're busier in retirement than you were.
No, I never believe in that one, actually. I'm definitely not busy. I don't want to be busy when I was working. I'm definitely not as busy as I was, which is all part of the deal, really, which is lovely.
Yeah.
But I am busy in a nice way.
Good.
And I set up a drivers club with classic cars because I don't know Rolls Royce.
Excellent.
So I set up a drivers club 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I got 115 members so far, and that's building quite. I'd only get to about 200 people.
Yeah.
But I just enjoy setting things up.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining me this
afternoon.
afternoon. I'm sure that everybody who's listened to us for more than 45
they're
minutes.
all asleep by now.
Well, I don't think so.
Anyway,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. That was great. All right.
Dave, if you can hear us.
He's asleep too.
He's asleep too.
Did any of it work? I don't know.
I don't know.
Is that all right?
That I'm not going to be able to work out because it's going to take ages for that to come through. So we're just going to have to keep our fingers and toes crossed.
If it's anything like the first 2 minutes, it could take 2 weeks.
It could. when I've done it before for about this length of time, it usually comes through overnight.
Right. Yeah.
So it usually appears at like 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So
I wouldn't be waiting for it.
Right, I'm going to step outside.
Yeah, sure. All right. You got me. You disappear. Shall I wait? Oh, hang on. Can I have a biscuit?
Oh, yes.
Is that right?